Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 512, and today's date is November 7th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Government's Manipulated Job Numbers Will Not Stop the Economic Collapse. Now, we see what has been happening. The job numbers are out. They've lowered the unemployment rate to 5.8%. We are in a total recovery. Everything is fine. Real estate's doing fine. Retail's doing fine. It seems like everything is just awesome, but we know better. It is not awesome. Basically, what's happening is the economic collapse is accelerating. The Federal Reserve, the central bankers, the governments, they are very, very nervous from what is coming. And we can see already Janet Yellen, the central bankers are out there and they are shifting the blame from themselves over to the government. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen blames part of the slow recovery on weak government support. So if they cannot get this event, if they cannot get this war started, they want you to understand that they are not to blame for this. It is the governments of each one of the countries, and you can see how they're trying to shift the blame right now. Now, as we know, the unemployment rate dropped to 5.8%, and everyone's looking around going, oh my God, this is fantastic. Well, there's certain things that have been going on here, and there's certain manipulation of the numbers to make us believe that everything is fine. You have to remember the holiday season is coming along here, and what we're seeing right now, that people not in the labor force is about 92.378 million from 92.584 million. In other words, a little over 101 million Americans are unemployed or out of the labor force at this time. Now, the thing is, 1 in 5 jobs added in October was either by a waiter or a bartender. So food services and drinking places added about 42,000 jobs in October, compared with an average gain of about 26,000 jobs per month over the prior 12 months. Obama's manufacturing renaissance promise as manufacturing workers have barely recouped any of the losses since the Great Depression started in 2008, while America has never had more waiters and bartenders. And we can see what is going on here. The Christmas season, the holiday season is approaching. These stores are hiring people. They're taking part-time work. And basically what we're seeing is absolutely no wage growth whatsoever. And we can see right now there is no wage growth is due to the aged portion of the labor force. Those 55 and over, and which would otherwise be retiring, they are continually getting more and more of these part-time jobs. Why? Because everything that they saved up, their retirement and everything else, cannot sustain their everyday living. They're coming up short because of 0% interest rates. Their money doesn't go as far. Inflation is hitting all the different areas like food and energy. And of course, we see energy coming down a little bit, but that's going to start rising once again. But we're seeing it come down right now. And we can see right now that they are taking on part-time work to make ends meet. And we can see right now that we saw a huge lift of those between ages of 16 and 24 now get jobs for the holiday season. A whopping 528,000 jobs were as a result of seasonally adjusted workers aged 16 to 24 years old. It is also the biggest monthly jump in young workers in the past decade and one of the highest in history. One wonders just where did this near-record surge in youth hiring come from in the month of October? And of course, we know the holiday season is approaching. We realize that more of these people are going to get these part-time jobs because, again, we have to remember they're coming out of college. Most of these people cannot find work. 70% do not have a job at this time, or they're getting a part-time job because they cannot find a job in their major making that nice salary. Now, as these job numbers have come out and they're trying to convince us that we are in this fantastic recovery, what do we see? Well, we see layoffs once again. And again, yesterday I reported that layoffs were up, and we're seeing Symantec laying off 2,000 people, Lanexus 1,000 people, Lavalin International, 4,000 people. JP Morgan is going to cut 3,000 more retail banking jobs. Express Scripts, 400 people. AIG shutting down its office in North Winds Parkway in Alpharetta, about 400 jobs lost there. bottom dollar sells all 66 locations, and all those locations closed down. Abercrombie and Fitch right now, they are reporting that their sales fell more than expected in September and October as fewer people headed to the mall and shoppers shunned clothing with the retailer's logo on it. And they're seeing their revenues have fell by 12%. Now, we have a former Obama administration official out there. His name is Steve Ratner, and he's explaining to the Americans why the economy is not what everyone thinks it is. And he's saying that wages are down and a lot of people who want to work still are not working. Why? Because the jobs are not out there. Even though there have been a huge number of new jobs created, a lot of Americans who want to work are still not working, Ratner said. The new jobs replace full-time, high-paying jobs with part-time, low-paying jobs. And again, this does not help the economy. And we're seeing huge amount of layoffs from major corporations. And again, these people who are making these salaries, who had a nice job, where are they going to find work? And again, this is why we're seeing bartenders, waiters. This is why we see the increase in that, because a lot of people cannot find work. Those people coming out of college are resorting to being a waiter and a bartender, and this is why we're seeing it continually going up and up and up. Now, it looks like Obama is going to be bailing out the credit card industry. And of course, as we know, do you remember when he had this credit card fiasco when his credit card was declined? Well, it's starting to seem like this was completely set up to convince everyone that he needed to do something. And again, this is a complete bailout for the credit card industry. Basically, what he did is that the credit card industry got a huge boost from President Obama last month when he signed an executive order requiring a switch to chip and PIN technology for government vendors and agencies. It dictates the Department of Treasury take necessary steps to guarantee payment terminals authorized by the agency have enhanced security features by January 2015. It would require a complete upgrade of all credit card machines approved by the Department of Treasury, a cost borne by government agencies instead of a credit card firms. The estimated cost for updating all the credit card terminals and machines is at $8 billion. Basically, Obama is guaranteeing a huge amount of income for credit card companies. Basically, he bailed them out, and he's putting money into their pockets. It looks like this was part of an agreement, and he's going ahead and doing it. Now, Ron Paul is out there, and he is saying, watch the petrodollar. Watch the petrodollar system and the factors affecting it. This is critically important, because once the dollar loses its coveted reserve status, the consequences will be dire for Americans. The faltering strategic regional position of Saudi Arabia, the rise of Iran, which is not part of the petrodollar system, failed U.S. interventions, Russia's increasing power as an energy giant, and the emergence of the BRICS nations all affect the substantiability of the petrodollar system. Watch the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, which has been deteriorating. The Saudis are furious at what they perceive to be the U.S. not holding up its end of the petrodollar deal. They believe that as part of the U.S. commitment to keep the region safe for their monarchy, the U.S. should have attacked its regional rivals Syria and Iran by now, and they may feel they are no longer obliged to uphold their part of the deal, namely selling their oil only in U.S. dollars. They've already heavily involved with China and can also tilt towards Russia. Oil traded in rubles and yuan could be the future result, a death knell for the petrodollar. And we also have to look at the Middle East and see what's going on there. We understand that the Middle East, Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, it is completely falling apart. The people there are rising up, and like I said, once they take over the governments, once they take over the oil fields, once they take over the ports, and they start shipping out this oil and they sell it not using the dollar, this is when the problems really start, because the countries around the world say, hey, we don't have to hold on to U.S. dollars, we don't need to keep it in our reserves, well, let's get rid of them. Those dollars float back to the U.S., it devalues the dollar. We see inflation, and all these countries sell the oil using yuan, ruble, gold, or any other currency, and this is going to be a huge, huge problem. Now, of course, the central bankers are not going to let this happen. They're going to do whatever they possibly can to stop it before it happens. But again, We have to see how it plays out. Doesn't mean they are successful every single time, but they will do everything they possibly can to stop it. Now, it looks like economist Martin Armstrong is predicting that rising resentment against the status quo as a result of economic inequality is likely to cause a serious political uprising before 2016. It looks more and more like a serious political uprising will erupt by 2016 once the economy turns down. This is the magic ingredient. Turn the economy down and you get civil unrest and revolution. Armstrong, who correctly predicted the 1987 Black Monday crash as well as the 1998 Russian financial collapse, asserts that the downfall of the system will be its inability to gauge the anger that the Americans currently feel towards their government. Right now, 74% of Americans are already angry or dissatisfied with the government. Further economic hardship could prove to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And as we know, all across the world, governments are training their forces, their police forces, their armies to push and control civil disobedience, to keep it down. And they're teaching them all different techniques to deal with this. We understand that Spain is doing this. We understand that Europe has a European police that belongs to the Eurozone that can be dispatched to any country. We understand London has water cannons on the ready to combat civil disobedience. We understand here in the United States there is DHS, who has all local law enforcement come in compliance with them. They're all militarized. They receive fabulous gifts and prizes like tanks, machine guns, armor, fatigues, surveillance equipment, and you name it, they have it. And they have been trained to deal with this type of situation. And we're seeing little parts of it all show up across the country, like Ferguson with Clive and Bundy and all different areas. And we see drills continually occurring across the country because they are prepping for this, and we are definitely going to see something occur as time goes on. Now, Putin is out there, and he's saying that the slumping oil prices dampen Russia's economic outlook. The country's president has said that at some moments of the crisis, it starts to feel like it is the politics that prevails in the pricing of energy resources. And he's basically blaming it on other countries that are doing this. He's saying that they're forcing the price of oil down to hit Russia hard. And he pretty much knows what's going on. He realizes that war is on its way, and he realizes that the central bankers are not going to stop provoking. And I gave an example a way back, but I'll just do it one more time. Basically, what the United States central bankers are doing, they're bullying different nations. And what they do, and this is the example I gave as two students who are walking down the hall. You have one who's a bully, one who's just walking down the hall. They poke the kid. They continue on their way. The next day, they do the same thing. This goes on for 3 weeks until one day that kid that was poked lashes out, and the bully says, "Hey, I was just walking down the hall and he hit me for no reason whatsoever." This is what the United States central bankers are trying to do with Russia, North Korea, with China, with Iran, with Syria. They're doing everything they possibly can. Now, it looks like Russia and China, they have agreed for a second gas pipeline to China, the so-called Western route. It's an additional to the Eastern route, which has already broken ground after a $400 billion deal was clinched in May. The opening of the Western route, I'm going to try to pronounce this, the Altai, would link Western China and Russia and supply an additional 30 cubic meters of gas, nearly doubling the gas deal reached in May. And we can see right now that Russia, China, and all the BRIC nations are completely separating themselves from the West right now. They're making deals within themselves and preparing for what is coming. Now, Obama is still talking about his executive order for immigration, and he's saying that he is going to sign it. But what's very interesting, he's going to wait for the end of the year. So basically what he's saying is that I'm going to wait until Congress is in recess and nobody is here, and in the middle of the night, maybe on New Year's Eve, I will push my executive order through. And it seems like when they need to get things through and everyone is objecting to it, they seem to do it in the middle of the night when no one is around. We see this happen quite a bit. Now, there's a huge problem with Obamacare. It seems like the Supreme Court agrees to rule on insurance subsidies in a new challenge to Obamacare. Simply put, the justices on Friday say they will decide whether the law authorizes subsidies that help millions of low and middle income people afford the health insurance premiums. Now, again, this is a lawsuit now, and it looks like the Supreme Court is actually going to take a look at it. Now, we have to understand that a lot of these judges might be being blackmailed by the NSA, where they might have something on them and they might use it, so we're going to have to watch this very closely. The lawsuit alleges that the subsidies helping individuals buy health insurance are only available in exchanges run by a state, not by the feds. If it succeeds, the likely result will be a death spiral, where higher premiums cause healthy consumers to drop out of the insurance market, which will cause higher premiums, which will cause more consumers to drop their insurance. Eventually, many states' individual insurance markets are likely to collapse if this lawsuit prevails. And also, all those illegals that are coming into the country, guess what? They will not be able to get subsidies. They will not be able to afford Obamacare, and this entire agenda completely falls apart. So we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully and see how this plays out. Now, there are experts out there, and they're talking about Ferguson now, because as we know, and I think it's November 10th, when the grand jury is going to give their ruling if they're going to indict the police officer. And right now it seems like they are not going to do this, and they're saying that if this comes down and he is not indicted, experts say the LA riots with Rodney King is what we should expect to happen in Ferguson, and we should expect this to spread across the country. Now, as we know, the government would love to crack down on the people with their militarized police to show everyone how they will come down on everyone if you try to act out against them. And we can see right now that they're going to push this. They're going to bring in agent provocadeurs, and they're going to try to gin this up the best they possibly can. So right after next week, we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. Now, it seems like there's a story about a Navy SEAL who has killed bin Laden. Paul Craig Roberts is out there. He put out a really good article about this, and he's saying that bin Laden's alleged demise at the hands of a SEAL team was a propaganda orchestration, the purpose of which was to give Obama a hero's laurels and a deep six Democratic talk of challenging his nomination for a second term. Osama bin Laden died in December of 2001 of renal failure and other health problems, having denied his last recorded video at any responsibility for 9/11, instead directing Americans to look inside their own government. Additionally, no one among the crew of the ship from which the White House reported bin Laden was buried at sea saw any such burial whatsoever, and the sailors sent messages home to that effect. Somehow a burial was held on board a ship on which there are constant watches and crew on alert at all hours, and no one witnessed the burial whatsoever. Of course, they had to get rid of the evidence because they threw it over the side of the ship into the ocean, so no one could ever look at the body. Additionally, the White House story of the alleged murder of bin Laden changed twice within the first 24 hours. The claim that Obama and his government watched the action transmitted live from cameras on the SEALs' helmets was quickly abandoned, despite the release of the photo of the Obama regime intently focused on a TV set and alleged to be watching the live action. Now, of course, when you look at the desk, you see that none of the computers are turned on, none of their devices are turned on, none of the lights are turned on. So this was a photo op, and it was completely staged. No video of the deed was ever released because, again, the Obama administration never releases any proof. They just give you a lot of lip service, or they give you fuzzy satellite photos with Photoshop to prove that something is happening, and then everyone debunks it saying, no, these aren't real. Now, of course, to date, there is no evidence whatsoever in behalf of the Obama regime claim. Not one tiny scrap just unsubstantiated, self-serving claims. So what is the claim by Rob O'Neill about? He is presented as a motivational speaker in search of clients. What better ploy among gullible Americans than to claim, I am the one who shot bin Laden? What better way to give Rob O'Neill's claim validity than for the Pentagon to denounce his revelation for breaking the obligation to remain silent? And we have to remember a lot of the SEAL team have died in strange accidents. Now, as we know, we have military troops in Western Africa. Of course, they're there to help with Ebola, and this is the story they're trying to convince us of. But what's very interesting is that General Dempsey is out there, and he's letting everyone know that the military's Ebola mission in West Africa could last 18 months or more in West Africa. Basically, what he's saying is that we have garrisoned the countries there. We are not leaving because we are there for a different reason. Basically, he said that the troops deployed in Liberia and Senegal aren't providing direct care, but rather are stabilizing the environment and giving confidence to the healthcare workers that if they do come down with the disease, they are there to support them, which is absolutely ridiculous. So basically, the troops are standing on standby, sitting around doing nothing, waiting for their chance to overthrow the government and take over the countries because they want those natural resources. This is what is definitely going on in this area. Now, they're saying that they're not coming in contact with anyone. They're there just to give support. But, of course, U.S. officials say that the top U.S. military officer has designated 5 U.S. bases where American troops would be housed and isolated for 21 days upon returning from Africa after serving in the Ebola response mission. The official said Joint Chiefs Chairman General Martin Dempsey signed a plan Friday that lists Fort Hood, Fort Bliss, which is in Texas, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington, and Joint Base Langley, which is in Virginia, as quarantine locations. Now, of course, these troops are not coming in contact with anyone there. They're there just for support, and we can see right now their mission really is to take over these countries and make sure that China and Russia do not maneuver their way into this area. Now, it looks like Hungary has come under strong U.S. pressure because of energy cooperation with Russia. The Hungarian parliament adopted a law that would make it possible to speed up the construction of the South Stream gas pipeline and will give the green light to companies without licenses to participate in the project. South Stream is a global infrastructure project launched by the Russian gas monopoly Gazprom to build a gas pipeline with capacity of about 63 billion cubic meters that will transport gas via the Black Sea to the South and Central Europe. Now, of course, they're building this to go around Ukraine. This is the whole purpose of it, because they didn't want to give Ukraine control, because we have to go back and remember that Biden has put his son on the board there. John Kerry put his roommate that was in college on the board there. It looks like they've taken over the pipeline system in Ukraine, and it looks like Russia is maneuvering and going around this. Now, it looks like that the United States and other countries are putting pressure on Hungary to allow the pipeline to go through their country, and the pipeline basically is going to go through territories of Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria. And we can see there's pressure right now on Hungary to not allow this to happen. Now, we understand that things are really getting out of control in Ukraine. It looks like a new war is brewing. It's slowly being ginned up by the Ukrainian government, by the central bankers. And it seems that military actions in the southeastern Ukraine and the economic crisis have led to a sharp increase in the number of nationals fleeing the country to find refuge abroad. Ukraine's migration service said the number of Ukrainians seeking to obtain foreign passports has grown 30% in the first 9 months of the year, reaching over 1.2 million people, and they realize what is happening, and they're trying to get out of the country right now. Now, Ukraine's government, they want the cabinet of ministers on Friday, and they've ordered the ministries and agencies to make a list of settlements in eastern Ukraine that are not controlled by the Kiev authorities to stop financing budget-reliant institutions in these settlements. A document to this effect posted on the official website of the Ukrainian government says budgetary financing to these will be resumed only when these territories are back under official Kiev control. So basically what they're saying, and Yatsenyuk was out there saying this, that we are going to take control of these areas. And how are they going to do this? Again, with force. And this is what they're building up to, because we have Luhansk Lysenko, the spokesman of the Ukraine military. He is out there saying that Russia is invading Ukraine. They brought in 32 Russian tanks and they drove them across the border. Now the question is, what is the motivation of Russia? Putin pretty much laid out a peace plan. He had Ukraine agree. Right now, Ukraine gave the first tranche to Gazprom to pay for the natural gas. Right now, there's peace. Why in the world would he bring tanks into Ukraine? Again, we have to look at the actions of the leaders, not what they're saying. And in the past, everything the Ukrainian government has said has always turned out to be false about troop buildup, about tanks coming into their country, about Russia shooting down MH17. So here we are once again, and we're getting information to pretty much build this false flag event. Like I said in the past, what they're going to do is they're going to make a situation and blame it on Russia. And here we are seeing the start of that. Now, the United Nations is out there, and they're saying they cannot confirm reports about any tanks entering Ukraine. And we also have to remember back that Ukraine bought tanks from Hungary. And they might be using this to show that Russia is bringing in the tanks. But of course, right now we haven't seen satellite proof. We haven't seen video. We haven't seen photographs. And basically all we're hearing is lip service. And believe me, if Russia was really invading the United States, Ukraine would have their satellites positioned over that area so fast, they would have perfect color photos showing the labeling on the tanks. They would have video, they would have photo images of everything that was going on to prove their point. And again, here we are once again where there is absolutely no proof. And again, NATO would be doing the same exact thing. And of course, we might see proof come out a couple days down the line when they give us a fuzzy black and white, which maybe looked like a 1970 satellite image. They might put, they might add a little photoshopping, draw some tanks in there, and make us believe that this is happening. But again, this is all about provoking war, and they realize they're running out of time, and the entire system is collapsing. Now, Moscow is out there, and they are sitting there going, listen, Kiev, stick to the Minsk ceasefire agreement. Stop making false invasion claims. Russia has called on Ukraine to stick to the Minsk peace process and disprove claims that Russia is deploying additional troops on the border. Kiev's again accused Russia of invading Ukraine, but has not produced any proof whatsoever. The calls from Russia come as tensions is rising in eastern Ukraine, and rebels say Kiev is preparing to break the ceasefire and resume hostilities. They see the buildup of troops all around them, and they're getting ready to do something, and we can see this is definitely building up. Now, NATO is out there, and they're considering having a large-scale maneuvers in Eastern Europe. Usually they have it in Western Europe, and it looks like they're going to have it in Eastern Europe and the Baltics, and is working on creating a new rapid response force. The commander of the Allied Joint Force Command, Brunsum, said Friday. The German general also noted that NATO is currently working on creating a rapid response force of about 5,000 to 7,000 troops, which would be ready to reach the operational area in 2 to 5 days. So we can see that this is completely building up. We can see they're getting ready for war. We can see they're going to provoke Russia as much as they possibly can. And we have to remember, a lot of the reports about this black energy malware that's in our financial system, which is in our power grid, our water system, you can see they're building up the propaganda, and believe me, this is not going to stop because they realize the collapse is coming, and you can see they are really pushing this really hard, and the Middle East is completely falling apart. In Yemen, tens of thousands of Yemeni people have taken to the streets to protest against U.S. interference in the country's internal affairs. The people in Yemen held a rally in the capital city of Sana'a to express their anger at U.S. meddling in the Arab country's affairs, saying the interference has only fueled instability and turmoil all over Yemen. The demonstration called for the expulsion of U.S. ambassadors to Sana'a over Washington's campaign to impose sanctions on two leaders. Any sanctions would have dangerous consequences that would threaten not only the security of Yemen, but also that of its neighbors, the GPC said in reaction to the threats. And we can see right now the people there want the United States puppet government completely out. They want the United States out of there, and the same thing is happening in Libya. Now, we understand the courts ruled that the puppet regime is no longer in power because they're not in the capital, but it looks like the puppet regime is rejecting the Supreme Court ruling because they're saying that they were under the threat of arms and they had like guns to their heads, and they made this ruling without really looking at the Constitution. And of course, they're saying this because they realize once this decision is made, they are no longer the puppet government, and the people of Libya have taken back their country. But don't worry, the United States and Canada and 6 European countries, including Britain and France, issued a joint statement urging Libya's rival parties to cease all military operations and to refrain from taking any steps which increase the polarization and divisions. The statement also said the 8 countries were studying carefully the decision by the Libya's Supreme Constitutional Court, its context and consequences. And of course, they are maneuvering to do something really big in Libya. They're not going to let this stand. They're going to come in and start using actions to stop what is going on, and they're already starting. The United States is considering imposing sanctions on Libya's combative factions. U.S. sanctions would be separate from potential United Nations sanctions. U.S. officials declined to say who they might target with sanctions or why they felt it necessary to look at U.S. penalties separate from the United Nations. Now, they're doing everything they possibly can because they need to create a story of why they need to invade again, because it wouldn't make sense to anybody that, let's see, they went into Libya, they freed the people, they created democracy, they put in a puppet government, and the people didn't like it? It makes no sense. So they're trying to figure out ways to go around this to stop what is happening, and it's going to get tougher and tougher as time goes on. Now, it looks like Obama wrote a letter to the Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran, and the Wall Street Journal is reporting this. Nobody knows what this letter says. Could this be a hidden agenda? Well, Susan Rice is out there, and she has stated that the United States is not engaged in military coordination with Iran in countering Islamic State forces in the Middle East. Rice at the White House briefing responded to a report that President Obama had written a letter to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, about Islamic State by saying, "We are in no way engaged in any military coordination with Iran on countering Islamic State." And again, we're going to have to find out what is going on here. What's the hidden agenda? Is he out there trying to do something? And we're going to have to take a closer look and see what is going on here. And at this point, nobody knows what this letter states. Now, again, we have to remember, Obama bypassed the Congress, went into Iran, struck a deal with them, had this document put into a secure area where no one was allowed to read it. Only those specific government officials were allowed to go in, and they couldn't bring their phone. They couldn't take it out of the room. They had to read it there and then leave it there, and nobody knows what that one says. And I'm thinking this was all to get to the central banking system, to put their natural resources on the US dollar, because this is exactly what the central bankers want. They want their system on the Western banking system, and this way they can prop up the US dollar. Now, it looks like Obama is going to be sending more troops to Iraq, just like we thought. President Obama authorized the U.S. military to send 1,500 more troops to Iraq. And of course, these are advisors. They're not combat troops or anything like that. So everyone calm down. They're just ready for combat if needed. And again, we're going to see more and more troops move into Iraq. This is called mission creep. They slowly bring them in. And before you know it, we're going to have 10 to 30,000 combat-ready military soldiers in Iraq. They've been setting this up, and we can see right now they're slowly maneuvering them in. And once all the troops are set up and ready to go, this is when we're going to see things really start to ramp up. Now, in Syria, it looks like the Islamic State has taken over certain regions of the area, and it looks like the Islamic State has shut all schools and areas it controls in eastern Syria, pending a religious revision of the curriculum. The Islamic State is tightening its rules on civilian life in Deir el-Zor province. The government still controls a military air base there and small pockets, but it looks like the Islamic State has part of the region. The Islamic State informed the teachers shall undergo a religious instructional course for 1 month, and the Islamic State officials were currently developing a new curriculum. They announced that they will only teach a little bit of mathematics. Their rationale is that all knowledge belongs to the Creator, so even the multiplication table shouldn't be taught. Wow, this sounds a lot like Common Core, doesn't it? And you know what they're doing there? They're transforming the population away from Syrian culture. They're removing them, dumbing them down, and they're going to do this as they go throughout Syria. So they're destroying the infrastructure. They're destroying their oil, their pipelines. They're re-educating their children. And you can see this is a transformation that's going on slowly. This is all part of the agenda. Now, there's reports that the Islamic State is going to be preparing lone wolf attacks in India. Well, we have to remember India is part of the BRIC nations, so where does terrorists go? Anywhere where countries are part of the BRIC nations or have huge amounts of natural resources. Indian intelligence agencies warn police to beef up security at foreign diplomatic missions in the country due to possible terrorist attacks orchestrated by the Islamic State. And we can see this is the same playbook. They're doing it in China right now with the protests there, and they're trying to overthrow the government before the BRICS go live in January. Now we see the Islamic State making their moves into India because they're part of the BRIC nations. We see provoking going on with Russia right now to get the war started. So all of this is being done all at once because the entire private Western central bank system is completely falling apart, and this is why everyone needs to get prepared. This is why you need to ramp up your supplies of toiletries, food. You need to have weapons. You need to have water. You need to have gold and silver and cash on hand. You need to make sure that you are prepared. You need batteries. You need a generator or of some type. We need extra water and things like that. You need to make sure that you're prepared because you can see what they're preparing for. Especially with this black energy malware where they're going to blame it on Russia, where they're going to bring down the power, the financial institutions, the water systems. They are ready to go full hog on this entire thing. They are ready to bring down the system. We can see already the central bankers are maneuvering and pushing and shifting everyone's eyes onto the government that they are at fault for the system coming down. We can see they're still continually provoking the other countries like Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and Syria, and they're pushing the agenda really hard at this point. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.